Okay, welcome everyone, and welcome to the breath of our ancestors. And this topic today that we're going to be talking about is very dear to my heart and dear to Lynn's heart. Lynn is my aunt and she lives in Florida in the States, and we've done some breath work together over the years. In fact, when I was 19, I did my first breath work with Lynn, and it really transformed my whole life. And so, yeah, I'm Kerry Veitch, and I've founded the Sacred Breath, and I also I teach with Alchemy of Breath, and I'm one of their trainers on their course, teaching new breathwork facilitators. So the reason this idea came to me was, I guess I woke up a couple of months ago one morning, and I just really wanted to share some of the experiences that we've had together, that Lynn and I have had together, and more specifically around family patterns and intergenerational healing, and how powerful the breath has been in facilitating that in my life, and I know in many others' lives. So a little bit about Lynn. So like many of us, Lynn has been on a journey of self-discovery since a really early age. And she's always delving into something new. And to begin with, she was inspired by a book and then sought out yoga classes. She learned to meditate, but there was always a yearning for connecting with something more. And that yearning took her at the age of 23 from Glasgow to Florida. And so our family's from Glasgow in Scotland, and she moved to the States when she was 23. So she took a job at Disney World and found her calling in breathwork and the healing hearts after that. So her background includes rebirthing, dynamic breathwork, intuitive craniosacral work, energy psychology, and the body-mind modality of bioenergetics. So a lot of studying, a lot of years experience, and she's also an ordained minister, presiding over weddings and baby blessings and transition ceremonies. So Lynn's been practicing in focused breath, which is her style of conscious connected breath work, for 37 years. And her passion is in providing a space for a person's inner journey, celebrating with them when they open to a place of inner peace and a great sense of self. For this is truly her own journey, in her own words. Oh, so Lynn, welcome. And
thank you, Kerry.
And so tell us a little bit about how did you hear about breathwork, and would you like to share an experience that you had from one of your earliest sessions?
Sure. First of all, I want to say that it is so thrilling to be here with you. When I think back to that time when you came over here and did the first breath session, and now here you are, a teacher and a facilitator of the breath, and we're talking about intergenerational patterns. And I think this is something that I'm thrilled that is staying in the family, because it's so close to my heart. And how did I hear about breathwork? I think it was in the mid-70s, and I heard about breathwork through some friends. And I thought, well, here's something else to try. And I just explored everything I could at that time: yoga, meditation, self-help workshops. And they were all really beneficial. But one of the things that I found was that emotionally, I would go through bouts of unexplained sadness or depression. And I was really good at hiding that. I could put on this beautiful smile and this face in the world, and nobody would know that I would go through these bouts of depression. And I still, even though I'd done all these other things, I still felt disconnected from myself. And often I felt like I was on the outside looking in. So when I heard about breathwork, I thought I'd try it. And I met this amazing breathwork yoga practitioner called Kerry. And he did something called dynamic breath. And up to this point, I was feeling, I had thought I was feeling, you know, it was not a very deep level of feeling. And then through the breath work, I had such profound experiences of emotional release, emotional opening, and spiritual experiences that I had never experienced the depth of feeling that I did when I started this. So it was, I was sold. I was sold.
Yeah.
So one experience I can share, which really relates to our topic today, and it also relates to the bouts of sadness I would go through. During a particular session I was having with I almost said Kerry, with Terry, I had been breathing deeply and for an extended period of time. Finally came to a place where I was just tired of trying to breathe. I just was so tired of trying. And then these words came to me. I'm so tired of trying. I'm so tired of trying. It just kept resonating and resonating in my mind. And I was feeling exhausted. And then I slipped into an altered state. And I felt like I was in the womb. It was totally a feeling. And what else I was experiencing in the womb was this extreme sadness, tremendous sadness and hopelessness. And this feeling of, I'm so tired of trying. And somehow, as I was feeling this, I knew it was my mother's sadness. I knew it was her sadness that I was experiencing. And at that point, the impression in my mind changed to, I'll try and make you happy.
Okay.
Then after a while, the thought became, I'm so tired of trying. So at some point in the session, I had made the decision, if I don't breathe, then I don't have to try. So I gave up the struggle right there. And I just let go of the breath. I let go of everything. And I drifted into a very calm, peaceful state. I came away from that session with a profound realization that up until that point in my life, I had made this underlying decision that on some level, I was responsible for my mother's happiness and sadness. The interesting thing is that later I learned from my father that my mother was extremely depressed during her pregnancy with me. She had given birth to twins. Your dad was one of them. She had given birth to twins 2 years earlier. And I believe she was going through postpartum depression, which at that time, nobody really addressed. It was just, you kind of get over it. So what this explained to me was the deep bouts of melancholy I had experienced through my life. They were not really mine. I had taken them on, I had embodied them in the womb. So, and as I reflected more on this session, it became clear how much this pattern had translated into my life. I would take on the task in relationships of trying to make the other person happy, which is futile. If somebody's not happy, you can't do that. And you can keep trying and it's still futile. And so I came to the awareness that it's not, if I don't breathe, I don't have to try. It was, if I do breathe, and I do breathe for me and for my happiness, I don't have to try.
That's a beautiful story and one that I've not heard before. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it so explains what we're here to talk about today. You know, the blueprint that we carry on from our ancestors, from our mothers and our mothers' mothers, and all the way down the family lineage, and how that can come through into our own lives and how it can impact our own lives. And we're not aware of it. And the breath brings our awareness to these patterns so that we can heal them and bring love to them and move forward, move onwards, and integrate them.
Yes, they're on a very non-verbal level, many of them.
Yeah.
So we don't realize that we're playing them out. We don't realize this.
Okay. And so can you explain in your words a little bit about what the blueprint is and how did you come to realization of its existence, which I believe was in the early 80s? Maybe some examples of when you worked with your clients and this came up.
Well, I can tell you how it came to my awareness was I would hear from clients repeatedly that either by this time I was in rebirthing, I was doing rebirthing. And I would hear repeatedly that they would not want to talk to their parents about the birth because they were afraid it would upset them. Or if they had talked to them, mom got defensive and felt guilty because she hadn't done it perfectly and didn't want to talk about it. And so as a doula, I witnessed the best planned births. I witnessed them just going in directions that people would never have imagined. I watched these lovely young mothers plan a perfect birth with, the very easy birth, and it would take hours for the labor. Or the child would end up in an incubator, or they would need a C-section. And I felt that it was not necessary to blame the parents for this, because surely the child had some part in this. The parents had planned everything perfectly, and surely the child had some part in this. Just like in everyday life, we have a part in whatever happens to us. That doesn't change. So why would it be different at birth? So the other thing that came up was people would say, well, I'm not going to be like my mother or my father. I'm not going to be like that. I don't want the kind of relationship they've got. And they would be playing it out without even realizing it, that they were doing exactly the same pattern that was already in the family. And it just took becoming aware of these patterns, becoming aware of what they were doing, and speaking for myself too, becoming aware of what I'm doing, to know that something needs to be different, something needs to go in a different direction. The blueprint, Kerry, the blueprint, that's a good one. In the early 80s, I'd been studying a lot of Eastern philosophy, and I came across a term called sanskaras. Sanskaras they're subtle energetic impressions of past intent, thoughts, actions, and we hold them in our field. And that's like a blueprint that we come in with. These patterns and these tendencies can be triggered at conception, pregnancy, birth, and they are sometimes just our own or their family patterns. And I see them as incomplete cycles waiting to be complete, or something that needs to be remedied in our lives. And they might be patterns of destruction, self-sabotage, or fear. And there's always the other side of that coin, because we inherit some good things too. We inherit creativity, talents, brilliance, intuition. We inherit all those as well. So some we want to keep and some We'd rather not. So what we heal and what we evolve passes on to the next generation. An example, a good example of intergenerational healing can be found in the indigenous tribes, where they highly honor and even pray to their ancestors for forgiveness and blessings. They hold a firm belief that as they heal their old hurts, the 7 previous generations and the 7 future generations benefit and are uplifted as well. So right now, in this time and day, in this age, and everything that's happening on the planet, I feel very strongly that we are in the process of a tremendous evolution of consciousness. From the old patriarchal ways of control and fear to a more compassionate and inclusive way of being, a more cooperative society with consideration for the whole. And this seems to me that it shows up in the tremendous breath work that you're part of, breathing for the whole planet. That's going to bring about tremendous compassion, tremendous love. Great evolution going on right now.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that every day. I'm seeing that every day in my work. I'm witnessing such a growth in breath work and just the awareness of the breath. Even in the last 5 years that I've been on my breath journey training, I've seen such change. But I'm really interested. So you mentioned your work as a doula. You mentioned rebirthing. Have you got any stories about that? About how you got into rebirthing? Because that's my training. The first training I did was with rebirthing, with School of Breathwork. And little did I know at the time when I joined the training, it was to overcome the fear that I had, the fear of my birth, which was I believe my biggest trauma in my life, very traumatic birth that I had. And I was attracted to that training, and I realized it was to really heal so many different elements of my life, all stemming from my birth. And so I'm interested to hear your journey with rebirthing.
Yeah, once you connect with those beliefs and that feeling that you had at your birth, it's like it really doesn't matter where they came from before that, because then you're connecting with what you need to work with for the rest of your life. That's what's changing. Yeah. So after I had done the dynamic breath sessions for quite some time, I picked up a book by Sandra Ray, who, as you know, is one of the pioneers of rebirthing. And it was called Loving Relationships. And I read about how our experience of relationships can come from conception and birth, and how our beliefs can affect that. So since relationships had not been one of my strong points and something I had struggled with quite a bit, I spent the next 3 years taking all the rebirthing trainings and seminars, and brought all the trainers to Orlando to do workshops and classes. So I wanted to learn as much about it as possible. It just made so much sense to me that how much our beliefs were affecting who we are and where those came from. So it always took it to a higher understanding for me. And then in one of the workshops, Sandra Ray said to me, "Oh, you should become a rebirther." And I'm, and it was like it hit me here in the heart. And it was like, yeah, I think I'd love to do this. I love this work and I'd love to do it. And so I left my job at Disney, my well-paid, secure job at Disney, and opened up my practice of rebirthing. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I just love the work, and it's just been such a big part of my life. And I want to say here too that not long after the loving relationships training was when I met my now husband and Jess, and we have been married for over 30 years. And I'd say we're having a really good innings. It's been a really good marriage. So the loving relationships training and the breath work and the rebirthing were a really good thing for me to catch on to.
Oh yeah, Jess is amazing. He's just such a great guy. So fun in life, in love with life as well. He's just great.
Yeah. And he delved right into the rebirthing with me. He loved
Oh
it.
yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Came to all the workshops. Yeah.
What a guy.
I know.
Oh, so I wanted to talk a little bit about our experience that we had with our breath work that we did together around this blueprint and intergenerational healing is what I was calling it. And I can share a little bit about my experience, and then you could share some of yours as well. But you know, a couple of years ago, I had this calling. I can only call it a calling to come to Florida to see you and to breathe with you. And at the time, I thought, hey, yeah, okay, that would be good. The reason why this is happening is because I'm training in breath work, and wouldn't it be cool to give Lynn a session instead of Lynn giving me a session, and we could exchange breathwork sessions, and that would be kind of like completing a cycle, or something was coming to my mind, but I wasn't sure what. So I Airbnb'd my house. I saved all the money up to bring my family out, and a few months later managed to make the long journey to the States. And it wasn't until the last day of our vacation that we made the time to work together. And I remember saying to Lynn, oh, Lynn, can you just pretend that I'm your first client? This is the first time with the client, so I can learn from you what you say and how you present things. And so Lynn did, and I started talking about, oh, my ache in my knee, and this hip hurts, and all my physical ailments were just coming to mind. And then I went to the bathroom before we started, and I was washing my hands. I looked in the mirror, and something just came to me, and I just said, you're not here to talk about your bloody ailments. And I was like, oh, where did that come from? And I turned around and I put my hand on the door to open it, and I got a flash of my grandma, Lynn's mum, and my dad. So I got a flash of Jane, and it was clear as day in my mind, and I was like, whoa, where did that come from? How's that possible? Anyway, I just continued in, and I lay down and started the connected breath with Lynn by my side. And yeah, very quickly I went into a very deep place, and I felt very quickly my breath was very uneven, and even just after a couple of breaths, and I could feel Lynn's energy next to me, and very strong, loving, just vibration and colors. And yeah, it was almost overwhelming. I almost asked her to move back a little bit further away from me because it just felt so strong. But I stayed with it. I stayed with the breath, and I knew that I had to. And then very quickly, my heart felt very heavy. It felt blocked energetically. It felt really weighed down. And I started to shake in my chest and my jaw and my shoulders. And I started to cry. And I was full of, I don't know, I was full of quite deep darkness, but there was an understanding that it wasn't my darkness, and the emotions that were coming up for me seemed foreign. They didn't feel like my feelings, the ones that that I've experienced before. They just felt different. They felt like someone else's. And I wasn't scared, but I just knew I needed to keep breathing. And even though the feelings were unfamiliar with me and it didn't make sense, and after some time, I understood that these feelings were my grandma's, were Jane's feelings, and how deeply isolated and sad I felt she was, and there was a sense of not being able to reach out for help, to get the help that she needed. And then I went into this other persona. I was a little girl with blonde hair running down the corridor of the house in Glasgow, and I went into the second door on the left, and I saw Jane sitting in the window in this chair, and I ran up to her, super excited and full of joy and energy. And there was some exchange, but she couldn't reach out to me. She couldn't reach her arms out to me. And even just talking about it now, I feel those same emotions coming up. It was such an intense journey. And I feel that, I just stood by Jane's side and I could feel her pain. And at this point, my legs were a bit numb, my head was fuzzy, and it was confusing switching between these different emotions and feelings. I think I understood later on that maybe this little girl was Lynn, and it was the connection with her mum that I was feeling. So Lynn moved, and then I became Jane again, and Lynn moved to my feet. And I hadn't spoken to Lynn the whole session. I was in some considerable pain, which I was expressing emotionally, but I couldn't speak to Lynn, but I knew she was there. And then the little girl sat beside me, perched by my arm, and I could feel her presence there and her beautiful warm energy. And the little girl said to Jane, I love you just the way that you are. And at that point, this veil unlifted all across my whole body, and there was a shooting white light energy around me, just filling me up from my heart space, and it rippled out throughout me and throughout the little girl next to me. And it was just such beautiful bliss and peace that I was feeling, and the connection with this little girl that was next to me, who just needed to utter those words, I love you just the way you are. And then later on in the session, I was on my side, and Lynn was asking me something about the session, and I couldn't tell her that I thought I'd seen her mum. I thought I'd been her mum, and I thought I'd been her as a little girl. I couldn't say that to her because of how upset I was in the session. And Lynn just said to me, I want you to visualize your grandma and granddad, your grandparents sitting next to you, and they've got presents for you, and they want to give you gifts. And I went into the place, I could visualize them, and actually I was a little girl looking at the grandparents. And when kids get offered presents, that's all they want to do, is like grab presents and open them. Well, for me, I don't know, maybe I was 5 or 6 or 7. I don't know what age I was, but I didn't want to take the gifts. I took them and then put them down at my side, because all I actually wanted was to be held by my grandparents and to have a hug from them. And it was so clear to me that I just, you know, for kids, they just want to be held by their family, by their grandparents. And so and that's what happened at the end. And Lynn, one key point actually that I need to share is the point where I felt this lifting of a veil, this energy, this freeing, loving energy and light come over me, was when Lynn was at my feet, and she actually held on to my feet at the exact point that this happened. So she was connected with me. So yeah, I mean, that's my experience. And Lynn, you were there, so.
I was there, and definitely I was there. And it amazes me how in sync we were in that session. It was almost like something took over and the session happened rather than doing a session. It was very profound. It really touched me very, very deeply. And when I read at the time of the session, and when I read what you had written about it also, the whole experience came back to me. And what I remember is that you went into a deep state very quickly. Your eyes went into REM, and you were in a deep state almost immediately. And I could see that you were having a struggle, that you were having some kind of an inner struggle that was showing up both in your breathing and your physical movements. But I also sensed that you had the courage to move through it. And you did. Beautifully, beautifully. Yeah. So it was very clear to me not to intervene, but to be there, just to be very present with your process. And talking of presence, I was also very aware of presence in the room. You talked about, you could feel that too. There was presence in the room. And it wasn't a presence so much as presence. And at first it was really heavy. And then it was a little bit lighter and more supportive. And then it became just loving and compassionate. And that's how the presence in the room shifted. I was feeling really connected to you. And I sensed that the tears that were coming from you were not yours. They were coming from you, but they were not yours. And they were much deeper than just your own tears. And then when I held your feet, like you said, when I went down to your feet and I held your feet, I remember looking at your face, and I had gasped. I was like, you were my mother. My mother's face was in your face, and there was no two ways about it. She was there. And I knew that her spirit was there, and I knew that that was what the session was about. And then I felt this surge, it must have been just about the time that you felt it, this surge of energy go through my body, and this beautiful light. I could see this light. And that for me was accompanied by this love from my mother. And I looked at your face and I silently told my mother and you how much I loved you and how much I loved her. So it was so clear to me that we were going through this whole process together. And Mom was there too. And I really, you know, after sharing my experience with my mother and the sadness, that I felt from her, this felt to me like a completion of that journey. And you knew when you came over here that something needed to be completed.
Wow, just wow, that just even brings tears to my eyes. That whole story that we've just shared, that experience that we've shared, really quite profound. And what's coming to mind is about this the 7 generations that you spoke about earlier. Do you think that this work that we've done and others do around this healing of ancestral patterns, or whatever you want to call it, do you feel that how do you feel it affects like generations to come or generations in the past?
The generations to come, yes, absolutely. It affects the generations to come. When we heal something, we pass it on. And you know, it doesn't even have to be a parent. It can be an aunt or an uncle. It can be in the family. And sometimes it does. Sometimes, you know, when I think about, for instance, the suffragettes. The suffragettes changed patterns in their lifetime. And now look at how much more free women are. And I think the suffragettes had a lot to do with that. So that's a generational pattern that was healed. And so there's no doubt, and there's no doubt for me that as we do our healing, everybody gets touched by it, and especially our direct family. The past, I can only go by experiences like yours and mine. I know we can connect through dreams or meditations with our ancestors. But somehow I think now when I connect with my mom, there's a peace that wasn't there before. So I think we can tell that not by scientific proof, but what we feel inside in our hearts.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been such an honor to speak with you today about this and to share our experience of our journey so far. And
so far,
so far. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah. I'd like to share a little bit about something I've learned. One of the things that I've learned, and one of the things that I've learned, one of the many things I've learned and continue to learn, is that this whole process is about letting go. It's about letting go of the breath. It's about letting go of expectations. It's about letting go of how we think things should be, and just surrendering to that which is we're part of, but is greater than ourselves. Because I believe that all these experiences come from that field, from that beautiful field. And so, and letting go is one of the biggest challenges for us as human beings. We like to hang on to what's familiar, but it really is the biggest gift to surrender into what is, and go with that.
Yeah, I see that with people when they first begin breath work. It's sometimes really hard to not control the exhale. People want to cling on to something, is what you're saying. And you see that when you're breathing with people. They control the exhale, so not fully ready to let go. And it's when you can let go that's when the magic happens with the breath. And I remember in my first few breath works, I just would say, I just surrender. Every time I exhaled, I would just say, I just surrender. And that would really help me go into that place with the breath and to really let go. So yeah. So Lynn, what are you up to next? I want to hear more from you.
Well, I'm planning a workshop online, a live stream, and it's got this title, which is Breath of Our Ancestors. And it follows up on what we've talked about today.
Great.
Yeah.
Amazing. And when is that? Do you know when that will be?
That will be in December, probably mid-December. And you can go to my website, which is focusedbreath.com, and you can find more information there. Great. And then one other thing I'm going to be doing, and this won't be until the beginning of the year, is a 7-week class on the chakras, breath work and the chakras. It's again, you can get more information on my website about that, but that's fun. It's fun and it's intense. It's both.
Great. And why have you chosen to delve into the chakras?
Oh, I've done that for many years. I love the chakras, and right now, I think our energies are shifting so fast that as we connect with each one, we can feel where they are and where they want to go, and breath work can do that. Yeah.
Great. Well, I look forward to coming to both of those, and it's focusedbreath.com.
Focusedbreath.com. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for making the time to come and hang out. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for asking me, and I love you so much.
Yeah, I love you too. Bye.
Yeah.